Good evening, everyone. I'm Monisha, and I'm second year undergraduate in Department of Civil Engineering. So, welcome to the Leadership Lecture Series, Mankind is My Business by Mr. Ganapathi. So, I call upon Mr. Kaviraju, CEO of Institutional Advancement, to introduce the speaker.
Good evening, everyone. It's an absolute honor for me to welcome the speaker for this evening, Mr. Ganapathi. Mr. Ganpa, as he is fondly called by all the friends. Mr. Ganapathi is a fellow of the Institute of Foreign Trade. Soon after graduation, he had the honor of promoting the products of India's largest public sector undertaking, then known as Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Mr. Ganapathy is credited with establishing BHEL's first major market outside of India. His leadership was defining as executive chairman of Trigen Technologies, a leading player in remote infrastructure management. The company has a revenue of nearly $150 million and he has created jobs for over 4,000 skilled technology professionals worldwide. This company, most importantly, as we all know, this company has developed the COVID app, which is the world's largest used vaccine management system. Such a proud moment for all of us as Indian citizens. He also serves as the chairman of Balvihar, part of the Guild of Services, supervising the schools for intellectually challenged and schools for special education. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and we look forward to an exciting and insightful session. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaviraj. And folks, great evening to each of you. It's always difficult to say no to your alumni, particularly when it comes from somebody who never stops smiling like Kaviraj. Honestly, I mean, the last few months that I've got to know him well, the interactions have been very, very directionally forward, and the kind of value that I'm sure he's bringing onto the system will be reflected in the quality of jobs that you'll all end up getting for sure. Thank you, Kavi. It's a privilege to be back in this hallowed campus. A campus that has changed the lives of many individuals over several years and created leaders for the world in several areas. I've deliberately resisted the temptation of talking about my company or a product, as you just heard, for which we have received several accolades, including from our director Kamakoti when I met him soon after he took over. He may not even remember, but his words of praise to the platform that we built for 1.4 billion Indians, with a strike rate as of last night of 2 billion, has made my entrepreneurship journey the last 45 years purposeful and meaningful. 45 years after I left IIT, a word of praise from your director. And I've seen it all. I've held positions across the spectrum that anybody would like to hold. But a word of praise from your director makes the ultimate difference to you. This is the importance of passing out from a great institute like the IIT. And I felt it that moment when Professor Kamakoti had known about us during his interactions, because the COVID app eventually was linked to the Arogya Setu app, which was done on campus here. So there was a connect with IIT everywhere. Folks, I've decided to shift from technology to what I personally feel is the only thing you are evaluated by the maker when one enters the departure lounge of God's Airlines. In my judgment, the only thing we are going to take with us when we leave this life is the humanity we have expressed to others. Let me begin at the beginning. I won the early battle of life. I was born to the right parents. In fact, in the US, they call it the Lucky Sperm Club. I belong to that. I'm the second child of a government officer. As Gandhi famously once said, there was enough for everyone's need at home, but not perhaps for everyone's greed. My parents set the foundation of my life and the value system and largely defined what success means to me today. He was the first civil servant of Free India, and he was the secretary to the Prime Minister and later the nation's finance secretary. But why I say that was there was always a government car available at home. But those days, going to office and coming back was not considered official. So whether it was the 45-degree temperature of Delhi or the 10-degree cold of Delhi or the monsoon in Delhi during July to September, he would either walk to office, a journey of 3 kilometers, or come back in an auto or a yellow taxi as it was then known. Uber and Ola didn't exist those days. Even if the car was parked at home, neither my brother nor my sister have ever sat in that car, even if it was stationary. That was my early childhood lesson in life's values. A lesson that corporate managers learn the hard way today, and some never do, and that's why you hear horror stories all the time. When we went to Delhi in 1969, government allotted a 3-bedroom apartment ahead of moving us to one of Luton's Delhi's famous bungalows. The transit was not expected to be more than 45 days. My mother would go about keeping the lawn and the garden in the ground floor apartment as if the apartment belonged to her. She went about creating a bloom in a desert, as it were. And when I asked her one day why, she said, "Whenever I'm given a new place, I must leave this place more beautiful than what I had inherited." That to me was my first lesson in life's values. Each of you is or will be a leader in your chosen area of profession. Let me share a few thoughts on leadership. Leadership is all about imagination. Helen Keller, born disabled, blind and deaf, the first such disabled person to earn a bachelor's degree, was asked, "What is worse than being blind and deaf?" She said, "Oh yes, having sight, but no vision." She went on to become one of 20th century's most famous humanitarians. Leadership, again, is also about exhibiting vision and converting that into reality through a team that trusts and walks the journey with you. Leadership is all about not seeing the world, but seeing the light. Leadership is about vision. It's about imagination. It's about sensitivity to the small requirements of the community that you live in. It's about building inclusion. It's about personal tenacity. It's about, very importantly, giving back to life more than what you've taken out of it. It's about creating extraordinary success with ordinary lives. Be a leader, but provide leadership that your community respects. The second experience for me was life-changing. I was a member of a leading NGO and went on to become governor of Rotary International. It then had an invited membership globally of 1.2 million. But long before all that, I led a team of Rotarians, each a great professional in his own way, to the deserts of Rajasthan. We went as Rotarians, not as businessmen, and after several hours of travel by train in non-air-conditioned comfort, I was feeling exhausted. All I wanted was a good bath and a good night's sleep. The Rotary meeting adjourned about midnight, and the president of the Rotary Club said to me, Ganpa, tonight we have an honor for you. You're going to spend the night with a 95-year-old man in his 200-year-old home in the desert. Immediately I knew there would be no bath, no running water, and as was common those days, no toilet seat either. I was tired. At least I thought I could get some sleep. But at 1 a.m., my host took me into the living room of this elderly man and sat down in the middle of the floor. I realized to my horror the 95-year-old man wanted to talk to me. I decided I'll be a gracious host for about 10 minutes at least, and will go to bed whether he liked it or not. He began to talk. He had been a Rotarian himself for half a century, and for the same 50 years, he had been a journalist with one of India's most outstanding newspapers then. And he knew them all. Lord Louis Mountbatten, Winston Churchill, Pandit Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, and the giants of the 20th century who had crossed the pages of our legendary land. He talked about them and knew our democracy, which was then only 40 years old. He talked of the Hindu religion and its philosophy of tolerance. He talked of the eternal things of hope, of love, of friendship, of wisdom, and his dreams and aspirations for the future. And on and on and on into the night, he talked of life, of liberty, of serving humanity, of peace, the deep sentiments of the human soul. Eventually, he got off the floor and went to the corner of his living room. He had a small little puja table. He picked up a small faded paper and he came and stood in front of me. I can see him even today, standing with such dignity, such majesty, a 5-foot brown, skin-wrinkled, white-haired old man. And he said this poem and said, "This reflects my dream for my life and my country." 95 years old, and he added, it is a poem the great American poet Robert Frost read at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy, and he began to read. He was actually wrong. Frost had indeed read a different poem, but at Kennedy's inauguration, but I didn't have the heart to correct him. And always in my mind, I see him as he stood there at night, reading Frost's immortal words. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, and promises to keep. Miles to go before I sleep, miles to go before I sleep. I looked at my watch. It was 5 a.m. in the morning. But I wasn't tired anymore. I'd been refreshed in the human spirit, as if I had a long shower and 12 hours of sleep. I looked at the face of the wise old man, reached over, touched his feet with the mark of respect that we do in our country, and then I couldn't help myself. I grabbed this little white man, hugged him to my chest, and with all my heart and love, I honestly loved him, truly loved him. A perfect stranger one night, out in the great deserts of India, I will never forget him. It sometimes feels that we live as if we wondered when life was going to begin. It isn't always clear just what we are looking for. But some of us sometimes persist in waiting so long that life slips by, finding us still waiting for something that has been going on all the time. There's no reason to doubt good intentions, but when in the world are we going to begin to live as if we understood that this is it, this is life, this is our time, our day, our generation, and one chance to do something for somebody else. This is the life in which the work of life, this life is to be done. That is Whether we are thrilled or disappointed, busy or bored, givers or takers, this is life. It is all we've got, and it is passing. That day, I gave myself a commitment that I will do everything possible to serve humanity. And I recall at that very moment an oft-told story which some of you might have heard. To set the context, let me repeat. A small boy was walking along the beach at low tide with countless thousands of small sea creatures having been washed up and were stranded and doomed to perish. A man watched as the boy picked up individual creatures and took them back into the water. I can see you are being very kind, the man who was watching said. But there must be 1,000,000 of them. It can't possibly make any difference. He added. Returning from the water's edge, the boy picked one more and threw it inside and said, "It will make a difference for this one." Folks, you and I can't change the world, but we can make a world of change for someone, somewhere. That, to me, became the meaning of life. The way we have applied humanity to our business, the way we have made mankind our business. This is the one thing that will go with us as we leave this life. John Adams said, former President of the United States, only two kinds of people in the world ever really count. Those who make a commitment and those who keep them. I decided to honor my commitment of making mankind my business. Once, as governor of Rotary, I went to a village. The village was very poor. Pennies every year were their income. The children, of course, didn't know they were poor. They sang me a song in Punjabi. But we understood each other even though we didn't understand each other's language. They took me into a cow dung hut. Kneeling on the floor was a beautiful young Indian woman with her head all bandaged. She couldn't see. The physician, a friend, and a Rotarian had just operated upon her with outdated equipment supplied by a foundation. This was years ago. She had had cataracts and had been blind for a number of years. In most countries, it's nothing. But those days, back in India, it was a big deal, particularly in the hinterland of our country. And people were blind for a long time. The doctor let me kneel beside him as he began to unravel the bandages of the eyes. Sitting in front of her, folks, were 3 young children, big brown eyes, matted hair, soiled little white robes, staring away at this woman. It was easy. I deduced very quickly that this was their mother. I'll never forget it. As I watched this doctor removing the bandages from this young mother's head, and in an instant she opened her eyes, and for the first time in her life, she saw her own 3 children. The look at on her face seared me. I began to cry. She wasn't the only one who got vision that day. I had always been able to see, or so I thought, till that day. I crawled out of that cow dung hut with a different perspective. What it was like to look on the face of a mother who sees her own 3 children for the first time in her life. It was a stunning revelation to me. And it broke me. I was devastated. And I remember to this day as if it were yesterday. I've never forgotten it. But I'll never forget the look on that mother's face, staring at her own 3 children. And all this because I had contributed a small sum of money to a foundation that treated vision across the globe. Almost immediately, I met a kid called Sri Ram. is a young adult of 17, intellectually challenged. He was working at BSN Murthy School for Vocational Services. This school specialized in teaching vocational skills to intellectually challenged children. Sri Ram went to this school. This young adult went there Monday to Friday, every day, every week, every month for several years. The school trained him to help and helped him make candles, envelopes, which were then sold in the market, and the school shared the profit with Sri Ram. It was at that time I was raising money for the Global Polio Fund to ensure that children around the world could walk freely like you and I. And I kept telling everybody I met that for every 100 rupees you contribute to the polio fund, you could immunize 25 children from polio around the world. When I went to BSN Murthy School for Vocational Services, Sri Ram, who didn't know what the morrow would bring, who didn't know what his future was, came up to me, and with the help of his mother, he told me in a trembling voice that he had earned 1,200 rupees the previous month by selling envelopes and candles. He gave me 200 rupees and told me, "Sir, I understand you are collecting 100 rupees to immunize 25 children from polio. Last month I earned 1,200 rupees. Please take 200 rupees and for me and immunize 50 children from polio from my side." I mean, an intellectually challenged kid walks up to you and reveals an entirely new aspect of life. It was a life-changing moment. I was shaken. It was then that I realized how someone privileged like me should be mobilizing more support for the people who are less privileged around the globe. Folks, it's probably safe to say that you're not the same person you were before you came to IIT. This is because of the things you have learned, felt and seen, and experienced. But more than anything else, it is because of the kind of person who comes here. He's very special, is very committed, is very unusual. You're leaders amongst leaders, like the eagle soaring above the crowd. This is why this institution is always unique, so special, so emotional, and if I might say, so rewarding. Always and inevitably, it is the people. A number of years ago, a former president of the United States made an observation that we might apply to all of us this evening. Among the delusions offered us by fuzzy-minded people is that imaginary creature, the common man. It is dinned into us that this is the century of the common man. The uncommon man is to be whittled down to size. It is a negation of individual dignity and a slogan of mediocrity and uniformity. But the greatest strides of human progress have come from uncommon men and uncommon women. The uncommon woman or man has three distinct qualities. First, a conviction about what they are doing. People follow people who are sincere, who really believe that what they are doing is important, like you and I. Second, the uncommon leader has vision, the ability to see possibilities that others do not see, and the faith in themselves to carry their vision to fruition, often in the face of much peer ridicule and opposition. These leaders set goals which are worthy of the quality of the people they lead. A man's reach must exceed his grasp, else what's a heaven for, uttered Robert Browning. The third, the uncommon men and women have the command of an idea. My resolve to serve mankind reached unmatched heights when I was invited to receive and spend a time with a few victims of the Chernobyl disaster. In the world's worst nuclear accident happened in 1996 at the Chernobyl nuclear power station. People were exposed to radioactivity 90 times greater than Hiroshima. 2,000 villages lay silent and uninhabited. A Rotary Club in England sponsored 10 children between the ages of 9 and 11. They were suffering from cancer, leukemia, and came to London for a month. I was invited to receive them and spend time with them. The Rotary Club there organized the purchase of shoes for every child, and clothes were donated. Two of the children arrived for the month with all their belongings in 2 paper carry bags. A full program was arranged, and the Rotarians and their families looked after them every day. Monday to Friday, from 9 to 4, morning, noon, and night, they were taken care of. Visit to places of interest, local schools, parks, McDonald's, who gave free meals, eye tests, dental checkups, they were all organized. Every member of the Rotary Club took part, and local papers published articles and pictures every week of what the children and the Rotary Clubs were doing. The children's interpreter said the children felt as if they were in a fairy tale. On the last evening, they put on a small concert, and on one occasion, they sang about happy children. A little girl said, "Happy children must live in England." That night, they said goodbye to everyone individually. They had nothing to give in return except their love and gratitude. There were a lot of tears shed that night, and I don't think the children were the only ones who cried. They returned home, each with a supply of vitamins for a year, and with a part of hearts of all of us who spent a month with them. I will never see them again, and who knows, at ages of 9 and 11 then, how long they would have lived. Is this a fairy tale? No. Through the magic of service to humanity, it was a fairy tale that came true to the children. Folks, charity begins at home. Appreciate it. But it need not end there. For the price of a round of drinks, the limbless can have an artificial limb fitted. No longer do they have to crawl in the dust and beg. They can walk upright with dignity and support a family. We have the power to use our money and make a difference. For example, a $100 gift, 3 blind people could have a simple cataract operation done that will restore their vision. Thanks to a $500 gift, men receive artificial limbs so that allows them to walk to work every day. With a $1,000 gift, we made 1,000 Bangladeshis often sleep well with mattresses, pillows, and blankets. And with a $5,000 gift, we supported an establishment of a fish farm that fed an entire village for a year. These are not large sums of money, and yet they work miracles in the lives of the recipient. In the words of Theodore Roosevelt, the credit belongs to the man who is actually at the arena, who strives valiantly, who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotions, and spend himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails with daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither knew victory nor defeat. Folks, as you enter a new voyage of service in a few years, keep one thing in mind, which has been my focus, which has been in the front and center of every decision I've taken. Never be afraid to fail. Do not be afraid to do not be afraid to fail. Many a great success comes after a few failed attempts. Permit me to paraphrase the life of one very famous failure. He failed in business in 31, defeated for legislature in 32, again failed in business in 33, defeated for speaker in 38, defeated for elector in 40, defeated for Congress in 43, defeated for Congress again in 48, defeated for Senate in 55, defeated for Vice President in 56, again defeated for Senate in 58, and finally in 1860, Abraham Lincoln won and became a man for the ages. Longfellow said, "The heights of great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night." I firmly believe, folks, that any man's finest hour, his greatest fulfillment to all he holds dear, is that moment when he has worked his heart out in a good cause and lies exhausted on the field of battle, victorious. Think it over. You're uncommon men and uncommon women. I projected my first slide was with David Warner in his Sydney, Australian home. He calls me his adopted father. So when he was going through a rough time, I don't know how many of you follow cricket, he was facing a 1-year ban or 2-year ban. I told my son, who manages him, and told him that this is the time we need to be with someone who is down, but not out. So we spent this Christmas Eve and New Year Eve with Warner and Candace and the children. He was delighted when the whole world was shunning. He said, "You traveled half a hemisphere to be with me." That to me came out of the early values that I picked from my mother. Kaviraj said, "What more can we do for the country?" We gave an app for 1.4 billion people. But for me, greater than that is this picture which I hold dear. This is Mudalan and this is Rajshri. These are two intellectually challenged kids. Through the magic of my oversight, they won in the Special Olympics last year. That to me, that is each of you is, again, I'm telling you, uncommon men, uncommon women. By the privilege of this education that you've received here, someday I hope that you will say that we've achieved heights never achieved before. Uncommon men, uncommon women. I wish you the best. Thank you. Yeah, anything outside this also is fine, including can ask what my favorite drink is. I'm willing to answer and have it with you. Okay.
So can you
Go ahead. I can hear you without the mic also.
So can you talk about the company that you were as an executive officer or Trigon Technologies? Can you talk about the experience? How you increased the revenue and all?
We didn't have any revenue when I took it over.
Yeah, you were talking about all the...
See, we took a grave risk. When I took over the company, the revenue was 6 million, 2 million loss, and 10 million in debts. Today, at the present run rate, we'll probably close fiscal 23 at 200 million with a profit of about 45 million. With a head count, of course, these days, guys who are in IT, who follow IT companies will know that linear growth is not a reflection on the strength of the company. We have a global head count of about 4,200. One of them is here with me. Yeah, see, as I said, IIT, let me tell you, this education of 4 years for you and 5 years for us is not about what you learn in the labs, not what you learn in, I don't know if they're still called MSB and HSB blocks or whatever. It is what you learn from the ecosystem. This makes you a leader. Again, at the risk of repeating myself, each of you is an uncommon man and an uncommon woman. You have the potential to change the lives. But all I ask is, while you change your lives, you change your ecosystem, you change your company, you change your work style and practice, look beyond yourself. Change the world around you. I tried doing it because I encountered a few life-changing experiences. I was telling Kaviraj and Professor Mahesh earlier this evening, and they knew it even before. I spend at least 12 hours at the Balavihar every week. It runs 3 schools. These are not schools that will admit you and I. These are schools for intellectually challenged children. And there are 2 schools because, as per the Act, you can't house both under 18 and over 18 if they are intellectually challenged in the same school. So we have 2 campuses. When you have 2 campuses, you need to teach them. So we have a school for teaching the intellectually challenged. These are things that you will feel only when you go through it. How do you attend? How do you respond to a situation when at 2:30 in the morning you get a call from the supervisor saying that, mentioned a kid's name, and he did what I always expected them to do. At 2:30, he went to the edge of the dormitory. This kid, 10, 11 perhaps, intellectually challenged, doesn't know where IIT is. We take them for movies once in a way to feel that experience. But certain things get registered in the minds much more impressionably than perhaps anything else. He picked up the phone, dialed 100, and said, I planted a bomb in the CM's house. Shit hit the ceiling, as you can imagine. Imagine handling a situation like that at 2:30 in the morning. And the police don't understand what intellectual challenge means. These are things no textbooks teach you, right? So one of the things that IIT education to me has done is it has made me a complete man. It gave me the spirit of entrepreneurship. I was checking with Kaviraj and he said 50,000, 5,000 alumnus, 35,000 live here, 20,000 in the US. I could have gone to the US. I could have, believe you me, folks, you were not even born then. Some of you might have heard. It would have taken me 2 minutes to find the best university in the world, the best place in the world to go there. But somewhere there was this spirit of entrepreneurship that was there. I said, what the heck? I can't be doing what 99% of my batch is doing. I am going to become a businessman. I did that. There were challenges. The journey is never without speed breakers. From here to the gate, I have 5 speed breakers and deer. Apart from the guy who used to be in the Gajendra circle and shout, Leplopoya for a long time. And we'll irritate the fellow by going on the right-hand side. You need to take challenges in life. This education is not all about A plus B whole squared. This is much more than that. This education, you have to translate it into creating value for your country. I sat alongside the Prime Minister when he spoke to 95 countries recommending the app. But for me, a happier moment would be if I can introduce him to 95 countries. Life doesn't end with here. Life ends with something like that. You can build a company, you can destroy it. You see it happening every day. You can be driven by market cap. I know how to take my share, double my share in 30 days. That's not what life is. Yeah, Kavi. Ji.
Phenomenal profile and experience that all the speakers that I listened to so far. But so if I look at our own students, like in my own case when I was in the campus, like so, and all of this holistic perspective that you got, does it have something to do with the upbringing and the early upbringing and the early exposure you had to various the early exposure that you had to various different senior executives at various levels, as opposed to, let's look at an average candidate who comes to IIT Madras. How can he or she develop a holistic perspective to a lot of these worldly problems and not just be confined only to the, I'm not saying that one is necessarily bad either, but like just only being a technology focused as opposed to developing a larger approach to the humanity and things, which is very important, right? So how can they consciously develop that kind of an approach? What should they do during the 4 years and things like that, right?
See, I answered the question partly in my opener when I said I won the early battle of life. But one of those things that taught me was, I still remember very clearly, I hope it's not being recorded, the privilege of dad being secretary to prime minister also brought in a chief minister of an important state to the dining table at home for want of time. Otherwise, he never entertained them. He talked about how in his home constituency from that state, people survive by eating rock, grass, and at times drainage water. And I also realized at that time I was paying 25 plus 1250, 3750 into 10 months into 5 years for this education. Globally recognized, but not used in India. And then I took a train journey across India, length and breadth, east, west, north, south. Train journey is the best to understand your country. If you can't drive, because those days roads didn't exist, and it was for the driving was for the brave and the adventurous. But you connect with humanity when they share their problems with you. Yes, I got to know a little more than what an average Indian would have got. But then what was the point in knowing it and not doing anything about it? So I said, okay, but at the same time, I also realized my limitations as an individual. But if I can, as I said, if you and I can't change the world, but it does make a world of change for someone. As she will tell you, no personal employee at home has ever left my job because I treat them like my own. So stretch that. Treat your community as your own. Start doing things for them. And this education helps you earn enough to do it. That's why you guys are uncommon men and uncommon women, meant to change the world. Sonia, that's a nice shirt.
Thank you, sir.
We didn't have access to such great clothes those days.
Sir, being an entrepreneur has become a trend these days. Every guy in college wants to be an entrepreneur rather than working into a MNC for some X amount of money. He wants to build his own. You did it back then. So I have, like, if I compare two scenarios, one taking a job into a company, learning, building, things going on stepwise, okay? And another scenario where I come out of the college and start my own, okay? So the second scenario, obviously the risk of failing is more. Comparatively, in the first scenario, the risk of failing is less because you have a little bit of experience, you know how corporate works and how things go on in a company. All right. So what would you suggest to take up a 5-year job, learn, understand, and build? or then, like go on with the scratch, get on with the stepping stones to success?
Yeah, very interesting and a great question. If you are potentially decided to be an entrepreneur, see, I did things differently, not because I could, but what the heck, you can't be part of the milieu, right? I wanted to be different. I met a person who possibly can be credited with the first instance of Make in India, a man called V. Krishnamurthy. Is a legend. You can Google and read about him. He built a company called BHEL. He built a company called Maruti, which is now Suzuki. He built a company called SAIL, Steel Authority of India. He established 12 steel factories across the country. I had the privilege of knowing him because he was my immediate neighbor. And whenever his dog got taken away for a walk, I would go to his house to meet him because I was mortally scared of dogs, even now. He gave me a piece of advice. He said, I quite appreciate your desire to be an entrepreneur. And he said, don't do it now. Don't say now. I'll tell you when. And it discouraged me from joining some of these fancy MNCs who came to the campus or who I knew for other reasons, including I still remember Albert Hoser, managing director of Siemens, coming to the house and pleading that I should join Siemens. I resisted all that temptation and instead, against the run of play, at a time when it wasn't considered fanciful to be in a public sector, I joined BHEL. I still remember the dinner vividly. Krishnamurthy uncle called me home and my parents as well for the dinner. He was then chairman of BHEL as also secretary Industries Government of India. He called me over for dinner ahead of me going for training. And then my mother asked him, where are you going to place him? Or my dad asked him, where are you going to place him? And my mother jumped the gun and said, I hope it will be Delhi. There was a mother in her. He said, no, I'm sending him to Trichy. 2 years I was in Trichy and I was working on the shop floor. I was in the, memory serves me right, the drum rolling machine. When somebody from Malaysia rang up and asked me, is the drum ready? I heard it as rum, So quite not understanding that drum and rum could sound synonymous on a failed telephone line. But those 2 years, I would be on the shop floor at 7:30, get back at about 10:30. That was the best experience I've ever had. And if you stretch that logic, even today it's valid. I think working for someone, learn at their expense, deep dive, you're more likely to succeed. See, Kavi knows I'm chairperson of the IIT Madras Entrepreneurs Forum. We mentor a lot of these startup kids. And one of the kids actually told me, sir, I have, the balance sheet says, my auditor gave me the balance sheet, sir. It says I made a profit of 25 lakhs, but I don't have 25 lakhs in the bank. Now, this is the kind of thing where your strength is now technology, but your strength when you leave the campus is not management. Management is something that you have to go through, feel, acquire, fail, and then you'll succeed. And that was a message I said, do not be afraid to fail. I have failed. I've folded up a few businesses. I didn't feel bad or shy. That one night I would have had an extra drink and gone to sleep. But wake up next morning with a clear thought, march forward. But for that, you need to have had some basic experience. It helps. I'm not saying people who have just stepped out and started have failed, but there are. But if you're from a home where, like me, where you were dependent on a paycheck to paycheck basis, I would go through the process of learning little more after learning here. It did? Yeah.
Would there be any areas you would recommend to which they can contribute uh, with the help of combining technology with social relevance?
You know, when I was governor of Rotary, I was invited to speak here to the Rotaract Club of IIT Madras. Till then, they were planting trees everywhere. Wherever there was a little gap, they'll bung in a tree. That was the easiest thing to do. But then I told those kids, I still remember, it was at the Central Lecture Theatre, CLT as it was called, and I reckon it's called even now. I said, why don't you guys do a little more and teach? You know, we as a company, I was, again, I hope it's not being recorded, but I was invited by Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh then, a man called Chandrababu Naidu. He loved technology. That was his passion. He lived it. Babu told me one day, Ganpa, can you suggest something different? I said, Babu, why don't you? And he said, one of the things I want to do is to double the capacity of my schools with greater infrastructure. Then over breakfast, I told him, why don't you deliver education virtually? So we did the first virtual classroom project for Babu in Andhra Pradesh. It worked very well. And we did it in 14 months because Chandrababu Naidu took the risk of running the fiber on rooftops, which we said you shouldn't do. He said, that's my problem. I'll handle the downside of that, you do this. So we set up a central studio, everything, and in real time education was being delivered. And that helped the country deliver education consistently and reliably during the pandemic. It became relevant, and in fact, I was sitting with I'm a member of the FICCI EdTech team, and as vice chair of FICCI, I preside over it. And then I found, when we did a deep dive, every fund, VC fund or a private equity or fund of its worth its salt, has invested in some edtech company in the country or the other, perhaps making India the edtech capital of the world. Why I say this is, you guys have terrific broadband connectivity, terrific connectivity in the campus. There are kids who aspire to become like you. Many out there. In fact, from here, I'm going to attend a wedding of a son of a support staff in my office. He was my caddy, actually. He was an alcoholic. And morning, noon, and night, he would hit the bottle. He'll wait outside the Tasmac shop. The minute it opens, he'll be the first customer till I made him a human being. His wife came home one day and cried. I said, ask him to report to the office. I took him on. He's a graduate, BSc Maths. There are many things we as a company do to help him, but what he has done to help himself is unique. He became a human being through the care that we provided. But in his area in Saidapet, where there are a lot of what they call as slums converted into lower income group houses, he runs a maths tuition for children below class 8. Now, if he can do it, you guys in half an hour select a local community. Don't go there. the power of technology helps you. Teach them where they are weak. Cross your hearts and tell me. See, I was in the campus last weekend. I was telling Kavi, there's a great entity. A classmate of mine who is a professor and head of department of urban transportation in McGill University in Canada, he had come, he was staying in the Taramani guest house. It's another story. I took a while trying to figure out where Taramani guest house is in the new layout, because when I went into the traditional way as we were used to, I found there was a teller sitting there, State Bank teller or somebody sitting there. Then we got rerouted, hit there. We came to a cafe coffee shop next to the Department of Management Studies. We both walked in. He has equal amount of gray hair, but more hair. Mine is a wig. But when we walked in, the shop was full, the cafe was full, but I was simply awed when two kids got up and gave their place to us. If you can have the respect for elders, love your juniors. Teach them. The power of teaching, power of converting a kid from where he is to where he ought to be is a thrill that you will remember for the rest of your life. Get one kid over the line. This is my message. You have knowledge. For God's sake, share it. And you have the ability to share it. In fact, I would urge IITs to adopt local communities and get volunteers. See, there's still a gap between what is delivered in school, what is there in the exam, and what is expected outside. You guys have gone through it. See, I still remember when I was preparing for the JEE, we used to go to a coaching class. I don't know if it's maybe delivered now online to you, but we physically had to go. Use the power of connectivity, reach out to them, teach them. Even English is a challenge to some of them. You can fill that gap.
Good evening, sir. Your talk was great, actually, sir.
Thank you.
Your talk was great.
Oh, thank you so much for the appreciation. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question is basically related to the personality development. Sir, I feel like a person between the age group of 20 to 30 is over enthusiastic. If he or she is over enthusiastic and if he or she tries to be the jack of all trades, is it good or bad?
See, do what you like. Don't compare yourself. There's no benchmark for yourself. You do what you want. If you're enjoying trying to be jack of all trades, so be it. Pick one. Ideally, if you have the time to attempt many things, you're a great guy. So if you want to be a jack of all trades, so be it. The world has enough opportunities for such people also at the end of the day. See, I tell my guys, never feel shy about what you're failing. Don't be proud about where you're winning. Arrive at the intersection. That's the fastest route to grow. Don't get lodged in either end of the spectrum. Enjoy what you're doing. Recognition and value comes on its own. See, when I set out on my journey with a capital of 12,500 rupees, did I think I could afford a Mercedes-Benz and a fleet of cars? No. If you do what is right, recognition and success comes automatically. See, I'll tell you, when I was president of the Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I went for a convocation to a university in Coimbatore. Interestingly, a young lady like you asked almost the same question. In fact, I told the Vice Chancellor, is there anything wrong in changing the format? The Chancellor was a friend of mine and he was to take over as President of Southern India after my term was over. He said, in typical Tamil, he said, "Sir, enna solraru saying, let him decide." I had a message to deliver, but then we had an interaction like this. A young lady asked the same thing, and I gave the same message. believe you me, she is an IAS officer in Uttar Pradesh. And I still remember, she reached out to me through the chamber after she got into the IAS. She said, I wanted to be a journalist, but she ended up as an IAS officer. So I think, pick the opportunity that comes your way, which you like, work on it, achieve it. See, there's no fixed path for success.
Thank you, sir. Your answer really motivated me.
Good. Thank you all for having me over, and wish you the best today, tomorrow, and always. Thank you.
I call upon Mr. Kaviraj to felicitate Mr. Ganapathi. Sorry. I'm very grateful to provide this vote of thanks. It was very eye-opening session, sir, where life is much more beyond the academics and the placements or the money that we are searching for. Thank you, sir.